Hello, dear viewers. I am a global nationalist. I support nationalism in my country, India, and in all countries around the world. Today, I want to talk about India's policies towards Russia, Ukraine, and the US, and how it has reacted to the crisis in Ukraine. Let me begin. So, first, I want to talk about India's voting record, voting in the UN on this crisis. The first vote came in 26th February, where India abstained in a vote in the United Nations Security Council when the US sponsored a resolution that deplored Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Aggression, I'm saying in double quotes, is what the US said. India abstained in this for this reason, given by uh, Mr. Trimurti, who is India's permanent representative to the UN ambassador. He said, "No solution can ever arrive at the cost of humans. We are also deeply concerned about the welfare of the Indian community, including a large number of Indian students in Ukraine." India's PR to the UN ambassador said the contemporary world order has been built on the UN Charter, international law, and respect for the sovereignty of territorial integrity of states. Dialogue is the only answer to settling differences and disputes, however daunting that may appear at this moment. It is a matter of regret that the path of diplomacy was given up. We must return to it. For all these reasons, India has chosen to abstain from this resolution. Russia vetoed the UN resolution, and so it did not pass. It received 11 votes in favor and 3 abstentions. And there was also another resolution brought in by the US and the UNSC where there was a resolution. Just 1 minute, let me. So, in this resolution, basically they wanted procedural voting to be held in a session on Ukraine, and where uh, basically um, this would allow a wider discussion in the UN about about the crisis in Ukraine. India abstained from this. It said this would give us a larger sense of the entire global sentiment. India's permanent representative to UN, T.S. Murthy, in his explanation of vote, said it was regrettable that the situation in Ukraine had worsened. However, he reiterated that dialogue and diplomacy was the only way forward. Our Prime Minister has advocated this strongly in his recent conversations with the leadership of the Russian Federation and Ukraine. He is referring to Prime Minister Modi's phone calls with President Vladimir Putin and President Volodymyr Zelensky of Russia and Ukraine, respectively. He continues, "In this regard, we welcome today's announcement by both sides to hold talks at the Belarus border. Our evacuation efforts have been adversely impacted by the complex and uncertain situation at the border crossings. It is important to maintain an uninterrupted and predictable movement of people. It is an urgent humanitarian necessity that must be immediately addressed. Taking into consideration the totality of the circumstances, we have decided to abstain." And yeah, then at the UN General Assembly, India again uh, voted to abstain this, voted in abstention against this, or not against, but with reference to this resolution, which was introduced again by the US. and strongly reprimanded Russia for invading Ukraine and demanded that there should be an immediate withdrawal of all Russian forces. And again, uh, Mr. T.S. Trimurti, has explained that keeping in view the totality of the evolving situation, India has decided to abstain, stating that India was deeply concerned. Tirumurti reminded that an Indian student was killed in Kharkiv due to the ongoing hostilities. We demand safe and uninterrupted passage for all Indian nationals, including our students who are still stranded in Ukraine, particularly from Kharkiv and other cities in the conflict zones. Many member states share this concern. We have reiterated this demand for both the Russian Federation and Ukraine. This remains our foremost priority. And he stated that India supported the call for an immediate ceasefire and safe humanitarian access to conflict zones. We remain firm in our conviction that differences can only be resolved through dialogue and diplomacy. Prime Minister Modi has unequivocally conveyed this in his discussions with world leaders. And India urges all member states to demonstrate their commitment to the principles of the UN Charter, to international law, and respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. And yeah, so now I'll explain why India has voted in the manner it has. It's because it has, uh, as it's the reasons are mainly given by the ambassador to the UN himself, by Mr. Trimurti, or rather permanent representative to UN ambassador. Uh, uh, so let's go back to what he said in the first abstention. He has said that he has called for an immediate cessation of violence and hostilities, and he also said no solution can ever arrive at the cost of humans. He also mentioned about the concerns they have about the welfare of the Indian community, including a large number of Indian students in Ukraine. And he also said this in the second abstention about their evacuation efforts have been adversely impacted by the complex and uncertain situation at the border crossings. Here also, he mentioned how an Indian student was killed in Kharkiv due to ongoing hostilities. This shows that right now, India's main concern with reference to the situation in Ukraine is to evacuate and rescue all its citizens in Ukraine. And so, in order for India to do this successfully, it needs to, at the moment, make sure its relations with both Ukraine and Russia are not negative and that they don't do anything to hurt their relations with either country. Because if they do, then these two countries may, it is not certain that they will, but they may take action against Indian citizens in Ukraine, which will make it more difficult for India to rescue them. So that is the first priority. The second reason is because all these resolutions blamed Russia. Here, the first one deplores in the strongest terms Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and the second one uh, was a procedural voting for holding a session on Ukraine, and this again was about that was kind of against Russia. It was brought about by and supported by the Western countries who are against Russia. This wasn't, again, a neutral examination of this situation. And here also, um, Russia was feeling defensive, saying that the resolution to condemn them will not contribute to the cessation of hostilities, and on the contrary, it can be used by him, who they're referring to is Zelensky. He can use this resolution to encourage Kiev radicals and nationalists and continue to determine policy in the country at any cost, holding the civilian population hostage. So, yeah, again, this is another count because India has good relations with Russia, is a partner of Russia. Russia sells weapons and military equipment to India, including nuclear powered submarines, and also built several nuclear power plants in India, and is India's trying to grow its trade relations with Russia. So it does not want to vote in favor of any resolution that goes against Russia. And this can be seen from here, where uh, because here in 2020 there was a RIC meet, and which is between Russia, China, and India. Russia endorsed India's permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, and said that the foreign ministers of the RIC grouping discussed reforms of the United Nations. So they support India in this, and in other areas also. Russia has voted in favor of India, especially on Kashmir. Um, and India has uh, regularly abstained in reference to resolutions that condemned Russia, because India has such a good friendship with Russia. And in fact, it often said that if you ask any child in India who India's best friend is, he will answer Russia. This was something that was said by Prime Minister Modi in his first visit, if I recall, to Russia as Prime Minister. So, yeah, and also as for why India did not vote in favor of Ukraine, is because Ukraine had condemned India after the 1998 nuclear tests, as Russian troops carry out special military operations. Yeah, so in 1998, the Atal Bihari Vajpayee led Indian government decided to conduct five nuclear tests and had stunned the world. The nuclear tests, Operation Shakti, set India on a road that made it not just a nuclear power but also assured the country's long-time security interests. Following the nuclear tests, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 1172 that demanded that India refrain from further nuclear tests and called them to become parties to the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty and the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban treaties. The resolution asked India to immediately stop their nuclear weapons development programs, to cease development of ballistic missiles, and further production of fissile material for nuclear weapons. Ukraine, which was not part of the UNSC, had issued a separate statement condemning India's actions to acquire nuclear technology. And also, so this shows that Ukraine has voted against India. So I guess India does feels that it can There's no need for India to support Ukraine at this moment because Ukraine had not supported India in the past. And so now this may make you wonder why India did not vote in favor of Russia. It is because it's not mentioned in the official statements by India at the UN. So this I have to kind of do through guesswork. Now, to understand why India has not voted in favor of Russia in the UN regarding the situation in Ukraine, we have to kind of go into the details of the crisis in Ukraine. The Ukraine situation is first and foremost outpouring, outgrowth of an internal civil conflict within Ukraine, whereby certain Russian speaking regions of Ukraine have separatist tendencies and want to become separate nations or to become parts of the Russian Federation. And Ukraine opposes this. Now, India also has its own separatist movements, specifically in Kashmir, and for some time it had separatist movements in the northeast India. However, those have died down. And so, if India were to support Russia in this, because Russia supports these separatist movements in Ukraine, it would make it difficult for India to condemn separatist movements within its own country. And therefore, it cannot support Russia on this. But, like I've said before, it won't directly condemn Russia because of its friendship with Russia. And so, yeah, that's why India has abstained, has chosen to remain neutral in this matter. And I think that this is the right position, and that once the crisis ends, in whatever way it does, then India should take a proper stock of the situation and then respond to how the state of affairs are at the end of this and decide whether to be neutral or with Russia or with US or Ukraine. Though, I mean, really, it's the West that's leading this. The West has instigated Ukraine against Russia, like I've mentioned in other videos. If you want to see them, click here, right here. So, yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. That India will give its final position after the situation settles. And I support this. I don't think we should be taking sides. And I think that this is a great opportunity for us because both America and Russia, the two are the most powerful countries in the world, and to a lesser extent, China, are going to have negative effects from this crisis. Russia and US, because they are going to be imposing economic sanctions against each other, and Russia and Europe, and China also because this is going to make uh, Russia stronger and will prevent China from uh, being dominating Russia in its partnership with Russia and will cause uh, yeah, and will also make the US more hostile to China because this situation will push Russia and China closer together because Russia will be isolated from the West completely. So this will make the US more anti-China. Although because the Democrats are in power and they're uh, financially tied to China, they will be minimally against China. They won't be very anti-China, which I think is a mistake, but that's a separate issue for a separate video. And however, India will not will be has economic and diplomatic ties with both of these so-called blocs, as you might call them. It is part of the Quad, which is a Western Asia Pacific bloc with the US and its allies, Australia and Japan. And India is also part of the SCO, which is, as I mentioned in the SCO videos I've made, um, it is a Central Asian, China, Russia sponsored grouping. India is a part of that as well. So, because India benefits from both these blocks, has good relation with both these blocks, it will be able to probably singularly benefit from the situation by growing and attracting more countries that are not directly aligned to either of these countries and can attract these countries to it and form a third bloc. So, yeah, I think India will benefit from this situation because it has remained neutral so far. And I'm happy with how things have gone. If you, yeah, so that's all I want to say. If you want to see other videos about India and India's current events from a nationalistic perspective, click on this playlist. If you want to see my previous video, click here. And I will be giving the sources for this video in links down in the description. Thank you for watching. Vande Mataram.